Hello, good evening, folks. How are you doing today? We hope you've been having a great time so far. US presidential elections and all of that, a lot of drama. Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, who's awake. Nobody can take that away from him right now. It's giving Donald Trump a run for his money. Pretty tight, pretty interesting. But what do we know about the election so far? It's a tight race. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea where it's going to go. Anyway, so back to Africa, back to Nigeria. A lot of things have happened in the past couple of weeks. Most of it, the focus on the NSAS protests in Nigeria. Now, what has that, got to do with what we're talking about tonight? Well, quite a lot, because with all the protests and all the distortions to business, disruptions everywhere, a lot of looting took place, and a lot of businesses have been crippled. Terribly crippled, as a matter of fact, because a lot of small businesses actually take out loans and all of that so that they can actually run a business. A lot of them were looted, boggled, totally destroyed. Their entire stores emptied. So they're in a tight position. But still, are there any government palliatives towards the taxation? Because, they still have to pay taxes, regardless of whatever happens. Nobody is going to listen to you. Tax is an age-old thing. The earliest forms of taxation, 6,000 years before Christ. They were found in form of clay tablets in Lagash, a town in modern-day Iraq. Now, of course, it has taken hold all over the world. So tax is something that is extremely important to every government, and it's also important to businesses, because governments cannot provide you with basic services without you contributing to the fund, without you supporting them as well, playing your part in making sure that there's enough funds for them to be able to put forward towards putting basic infrastructure in place, creating an enabling environment for everybody to be able to do business. Tonight, we have a great guest on the show. As far as I'm concerned, he's one of the most intelligent young men I've ever met in my life. Well, is he exactly young? He doesn't fall within the youth anymore, but he's still a relatively young man. And he's a lawyer, he's a tax consultant, and arguably one of the brightest young minds in Nigeria. His name is Michael Ango. Good evening, Michael. How are you?
Habib, are you sure I'm the one you're introducing? Because this accolades, I can't seem to. I'm looking for the person you are introducing here.
Well, Michael, if I was going to start reading your curriculum vitae online, it's probably going to take half of the show. So, do I start from there? Or do I just go ahead with the little introduction I have just done?
Let's go ahead with the show. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on tonight, Michael.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. You've been doing wonderful things. And recently we heard that you got promoted as well at Anderson Tax. That's massive, Michael. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
So that also speaks to the brilliant things that you're doing. And like I said, your curriculum vitae, if I was going to read it, you don't have to show. So you are in a very, very good position to tell us a little bit about taxation. First things first, like a lot of things in Nigeria, a lot of people don't have adequate information. People just throw policies out there and they expect people to just follow up on those policies without people actually understanding what those policies are about in the first place. Now, Michael, what is taxation?
So, that's a very broad question. It's the kind of question that if it were to be in an examination, you probably ask for an extra sheet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To bring it down to the level where anyone can understand. So, taxation in broad terms is any forced collection by government or an authority from its citizens, i.e., it could be based on income, it could be based on transaction, it could even be based on assets. So any forced collection of revenue from citizens, from residents in a particular jurisdiction could be broadly termed tax, or a tax. And then, of course, the system around it, all of that is built, is what is called the tax system. So taxation is the process, the procedures, the systems, the legislation, the institutions that implement taxes in a particular given area. In Nigeria, of course, we were colonized by the British, but even prior to colonial rule, we had our own form of tax system. Up north here, we had what we called Jangali tax. We had that's cattle tax. There was also taxes, for males that, if you have an adult male, they levy taxes. And these taxes were essentially used, for defense, of course, for upkeep of the emir and all of that. We
Yeah.
had all systems all across the different empires, as you will, that made up, this area that was then, that was subsequently became Nigeria. So in the West, Yoruba land, they also had form of taxation. In Igbo land, they also had, form of taxation. So, but again, prior to colonialism, there were some of these contributions were voluntary. But when the
Yeah.
British came here, they then imposed a formal system of taxation. Of course, up north, what they did was they used the existing systems, the emirs and on the sultan and all of that. Down south, then what they did try to do was use the indirect rule system. Because they found out that they had less um, hierarchical societies than they were up north. But in a nutshell, in modern times, taxation is the means by which a government, earns revenue, public revenue to provide infrastructure, security, social amenities, defense, and all of that. So it's the primary means by which governments globally, raise public revenue from within their society. So I think that definition should suffice for now.
Yeah, I mean that was in depth enough. Now, for a lot of Nigerians, they just do not understand, why they have to pay tax. Excuse me, especially because let me not say especially because that's my personal opinion. That would have been my own personal opinion. But a lot of people actually feel that they pay these taxes and they don't get to see these amenities being put into place. In some cases, a lot of people feel that the monies are appropriated illegally by people
Mhm.
in Federal Inland Revenue Service or the state revenue services, possibly
Yeah.
because of the amount of powers that government officials have, and there's a lot of impunity that takes place when it comes to things like that, where the average citizen cannot see or cannot monitor. Does that truly explain the tax apathy in Nigeria?
Well, I think again, for you to understand why there's a significant apathy towards payment of taxes in Nigeria, you have to go back into history. So, like I said, the current system of taxation that we operate was one that was enforced on us by the British. Okay, which is not to say that even in pre-colonial times people didn't evade taxes. The reality about taxation is that nobody wants to pay taxes voluntarily. I mean, it's your money. And the government says, out of 100 you have, give me 10 or give me 20. Why? But in modern times, taxes are part of the social contract. So, if you read John Locke, if you read Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the rest, it's part of the social contract whereby, you give up certain rights to the government. And in return
Yeah,
for giving up those rights, the government then protects you from marauders, it protects you from bandits. If you're sick, you can go to the hospital. It provides a road from your house to your school. It provides electricity for you and all of that. So that's the idea of the social construct. Now, the problem with that is that the moment there is a disconnect uh, in that relationship, then of course we then find that people then become apathetic to paying taxes. So if it's not like the chicken and the egg anyway, so it's always which one came first. Where people are pathetic to paying taxes because they couldn't see the benefits of paying taxes? Or is it because people stopped or refused to pay the full taxes that they couldn't see the benefits of those taxes? I think it's a mixture of the two. Um,
okay.
right after colonialism, when in the early 60s and all of that, there was a very high level of tax compliance. And maybe again, it meant that government was closer to the people then. The people could see and understand what government was doing. We had free education, we had free healthcare, and all sorts. You could see infrastructure being built, government was providing amenities so people could feel it. So when you paid those taxes, you knew that you were paying those taxes in return for those things that government was giving to you. Then we hit oil. And then, of course, the military came in. And, again, taxes are a function of legitimacy to a large extent. Uh,
Yes.
let's use the typical example. You live in an estate, you have an estate executive. If they have legitimacy, it will be easier for them to enforce the estate dues. But if they just wake up one morning and enforce themselves and say they're estate, uh, executives, how are they going to enforce the dues that they need to collect within the estate? So it's like that also in the broader society. When we had military regime, these were not elected leaders. They were not answerable to us. We didn't elect them, and they also perceived that look. In any case, we had oil revenues, and so that relationship significantly broke down over the years. Now, when civilian rule came, of course, the civilian governments tried to reconnect. The challenge is that the reconnection has either been slow or in some instances, it's actually failed. And so you have that significant apathy towards paying taxes. Having said that, let me point out that payment of taxes is also a statutory obligation. It's a lawful obligation. It's something that's provided in the law. If you fail to pay your taxes, there are penalties for doing that. So again, we need to then balance it because you have a law. It's just like do not commit murder, do not steal, do not drive on the wrong side of the road. Pay your taxes is also, a positive legislation. There are positive laws that must be obeyed. But having said that, there are differences in so there are certain laws that you can easily enforce and there's some that you can't enforce until you get the buy-in of the citizenry, and tax laws fall into that category. So what I would say is that government needs to do a lot more. They need to communicate, they need to enlighten, they need to educate, but more importantly, they need to show the benefits of taxes. If people see that your taxes are working for you, then they will feel more likely to pay the taxes. And we've seen instances, even in the last few years of our civilian regime, we've had instances of governors, I wouldn't name names, who did well, and then tax collections within their states significantly increased. Even at the federal level, there was a time when the federal tax authority was perceived as doing well and people could relate with it. So tax compliance rates also increased. So at the end of the day, it's a relationship that needs to be nurtured both ways, but the greater responsibility lies with government in convincing the citizenry that they need to pay their fair share of taxes.
So, as of 2019, according to the FIRS,
yeah,
tax revenue was 5.26 trillion. That's about 30.5 billion US dollars.
Yeah, at what exchange rate? 360 or 305?
I think that was at 360.
Yeah.
Now
Maybe
you have 3.1 million businesses registered in Nigeria as of about around the same time, which was September 2019.
Yeah.
So on the average, what that would mean is that each business pays about 1,710 naira, less than $5 in taxes. That's a lot of apathy. Quite a lot of apathy.
So first thing I'll say is be careful with the statistics here because two things first. We do not have an accurate list of businesses which are registered in Nigeria. And the reason is simple. The only way you can get to know if a business is registered is if you go to the CAC and then you get the records of that business. But more importantly, if the business is also registered with the tax authority. And you could have two businesses. So for example, I could run my out of my house now. I could run a bakery. I could run a poultry. I could also run an eatery as well. But if I only register the bakery, then you will say there's only one business registered here. So let's not dwell on the number of businesses registered. Again, if you try to just say you take the number of businesses and then divide it by the tax collection to give you an average, it may not work. Because in this tax collection, what you have is multinational companies, you have oil and gas companies paying taxes, you have the big multinationals, you have the MTNs, the Nigerian breweries, and all of the bigger companies. What I would like to say in looking at tax collection is that
yes,
This is only federal tax collection you're looking at. There's a lot of taxes that are also paid to the states. So personal income taxes are paid to the states. That is taxes from employment, individuals in employment, and all of that. And there are a range of other levies and charges that states collect, which are not, termed taxes, but they also fall into tax. So you have things like development levy.
Yes.
That's also a form of tax. So what I'll say is that no doubt there's apathy, but the reality again is that taxes are a function of business activity, economic activity within the country. And so where you have significant economic activity, which is profitable, so it's not just significant economic activity, but profitable economic activity,
Economic activity, yeah.
it's likely to be that people will pay taxes, commensurate with what they've made or the profit they've earned. When you have economic activity which is not profitable or which has very low profits, then it will also reflect in low tax receipts. So that is another area again where government needs to do better in terms of ensuring that the conditions or the business environment, the ease of doing business in Nigeria is much is made easier. Things like cost of power, things like cost of infrastructure. You have a poultry which is about 20, 30 kilometers away from where you need to go and sell your poultry products.
Yes,
But
yeah.
then it takes you 5, 6 hours because the road is horrible. There are no rail lines to move, your products from the hinterland to the market. You have onions, you've done very well, you've had a very good harvest, but then to move the onions from Kebbi to Lagos takes you 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, as it were, because you're having to move them by road. Paying last mile, you're paying all sorts. So the cost of business is a significant factor, and the ease of doing business. So look, let me put it this way, okay?
Yes.
Businesses are just like human beings. When you treat a human being nicely, he's more likely to respond to you with love, with reciprocal, to reciprocate it with love and kindness. And likewise, if you treat a business properly, then the business is more likely to reciprocate with its taxes. So yes, like I said, there's apathy, but the reality is that the businesses also have to do well before government can then say, look, you need to come and pay your fair share of taxes.
So, in recent times, Nigeria saw something the country had never experienced before, which was the end SARS protests. Are you there, Michael? Can you hear me?
I'm here with you.
Okay, sorry, the screen is frozen. So, anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
Is it fine now?
No, it's the Nigerian network. We understand it. We live with it. It's part of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is actually, because if your internet is slow, if your internet has issues, then all these are also parts of doing a business.
Oh yeah. So Nigeria experienced, a mini revolution of sorts. It was the end SARS. Now, the end SARS convoluted. And then the next thing we saw was a massive escalation. And then next thing we saw was a case of private businesses were being looted. Everywhere was hijacked by hoodlums. Now, are there any tax palliatives for this thing? Because the key word here seems to be palliatives. They're finding COVID palliatives in warehouses and all of that. Can you hear me, Mike?
I'm here with you. I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I said, are there any tax palliatives? Since it's palliatives that is the operational word now in the polity, everybody is talking about palliatives. What can government do?
Okay, before I answer your question, let me first, express my heartfelt condolence to everyone who was affected by the protest. People lost their lives. People lost their loved ones. People lost businesses. Government was also affected. In Lagos State, we saw buses being burned. We saw public buildings. The MPA building was burned. And so, again, I must say, condolences to everyone and also to the government for the losses it incurred. In any case, government property is our property. So If government property is destroyed, public properties, you and I, we own those properties. Now, to the issue of palliatives for persons who have suffered losses during the protest. Sadly, what I'll say to you is that, there isn't an obligation, as it were, on government to provide palliatives or some form of support to businesses that have suffered. Because
Really?
yes, there isn't an obligation. That's the point I'm making. Because I mean, if you start, okay, so you have a car and you go out there and your car is burnt, is government supposed to replace your car for you? You're supposed to have insurance. If your car is insured, your insurance will make
The
good
network
for the
seems
loss.
to have frozen.
Can you hear me? I
I
can
seem
hear
to
you
have
very well.
lost Michael there for a second. I'm sure he'll come back on shortly. Michael?
I can hear you very well.
All right, great. Sorry, I lost you at my end. Go ahead.
So what I said is, government doesn't have an obligation to make good losses suffered by businesses or even individuals. The example I gave was that if you have a motor vehicle that you use for your personal business or your personal transportation, and it gets burnt, whether you have an accident or let's assume hoodlums burn the car, government doesn't have an obligation to replace your car. You should have insured your car. Having said that, there is nothing that stops government from supporting businesses or giving some form of succor to businesses that have suffered losses. The problem here is that we all know that currently the government or the nation is facing significant revenue shortfall. Our major source of foreign exchange earnings, which is crude oil, the global prices have dropped significantly, and government is really looking for revenue. So it's difficult to then go back to that same government and say, my business was looted, my shop was burgled and bombed. Can you please support me? But I know that states like Lagos, for example, have said they will set up a fund, and they will try to help those businesses get back on their feet. I think over and above all of this, and I'm talking now from a business point of view, I think the lesson is that you must always expect the unexpected when you're doing business. And for me, this quick solution to that is insurance. I think businesses have to learn to insure, whether against fire, against theft, or even what we call an act of God, force majeure.
Fast for job.
What if there's an earthquake or lightning strike or
Lightning
flood
strike for that, yes.
or something? So businesses have to account for some of these things when they are carrying out their day-to-day businesses. Now, it is more likely that the multinational companies or the bigger companies, the Spar, ShopRite, and maybe the mall owners will be better able to absorb losses than, of course, the small business owner who has a small shop there, goods worth maybe 1-2 million naira and loses everything wiped out. So maybe in supporting or assisting businesses, government may then need to segment them and say, look, if you are a small business owner, we will support you to this extent. If you are a big business owner, maybe what we can then do is rebuild the mall and all of that. But then we're not going to have, we're not going to give you actual cash or funds to restock your shop and all of that. So there might have to be that kind of, segmented support. But in all of this, I think what is more important is that the root causes of the protests are addressed, and so that we avoid a recurrence of such incidents again in our country.
It's quite a shocker. It's quite a shame that people would have to go through that. And for some strange reason, people seem to have other ideas when it comes to paying taxes to government after they have gone through such trauma, especially with their businesses, because a lot of those businesses, one, will never recover. Some of them that might be able to recover, a lot of them have actually taken out facilities from financial institutions, and they will have to go try and reapply for some other facility. Hopefully, if they have good credit, they'll be able to get some more, overdrafts and stuff, and then get back into business. How or what kind of advice can you give those type of small businesses, Michael?
Okay, I mean, so you said something very interesting, that a small business that has gone through this kind of loss, how does it even begin to pay taxes? You have probably facilities that you need to service. So in that area, I think that's one area where government can actually come in. If you have a facility, for example, I think government can then say to the banks or the financial institutions, just like happened during COVID, that look, maybe you need to suspend this facility for X amount of time to allow this business get back on its feet. In any case, the business is dead. So if you've extended a facility to someone and his shop has been totally burnt now, what's the collateral? How do you end? How do you regain your? How do you end? How do you get back your loans? So it's
Yeah.
probably in your best interest to support such a business to get back on its feet. So there are a few things government can do there, but also private sector can come in and support equally. So one instance, like I've said, is the banks putting moratoriums on loans and all of that. The insurance companies where these people have insurance should pay up claims promptly, you know. And then, of course, if you have investors, then your investors may then need to also take a hit and say, okay, fine, we don't expect you to have any profits in the next maybe 1, 2 years, and then maybe putting more capital into the business and all of that. I think at the end of the day, people will have to approach these things practically.
Okay, so it's hung up again.
But can you hear me?
We're lucky tonight; it's not so bad.
All right,
So,
and I'm using one of the best. At least that's what they say. It's one of the best, you know, internet service providers in Abuja.
well,
But
they tell us that each and every one of them is the best, but at the end of the day, you find out that you have to use 6, 7 different types of services in Nigeria for
yeah,
you to
but
get
this is I'm
a
using. So what I did was it's broadband and cable into my house. So I would have thought it would function very well.
Oh, well, sometimes these things happen even in the quote unquote developed countries.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't.
yeah, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
like I said, tonight it's not half bad because it's just a couple of seconds and then you are back.
All right.
And for me, that is absolutely great because at least we're getting you back almost immediately, as opposed to one or two other experiences that we've had, which were
Mhm.
quite shocking, to be quite honest with you.
So did you get me when I said, government will have to play its part, the private sector would also have to play its part,
Oh yeah,
the insurance companies and even the investors may
oh
all
yeah.
have to chip in and support these businesses to get back on their feet. Now, from the government perspective, and this is where I expect to see some creative thoughts. If a business has suffered significant damages or loss,
Yeah.
it is possible to say to such a business that we will excuse you from paying taxes for a particular period of time. And the tax laws allow those things to happen. And indeed, it happened during the COVID, lockdowns and all. Government extended the time for paying of taxes. In some instances, penalties and interest or unpaid taxes were waived. But more importantly, government can say, if you have any business that went through a loss during this period, then you don't have to file your taxes for 2021, as the case may be. In any case, I must say that all of those things which were lost can be expensed by those businesses. They will form part of business losses, and then those businesses can then claim them as part of their, business expense. I think there are provisions in our tax laws that allow you, if something is lost either to theft or to damage and all of that, there's a way that you can account for that in arriving at your taxable profits. So I think with respect to supporting the businesses, lessening the tax burden on them, it is something that the government should look at. These businesses are identifiable anyway. We know where they are. We know where they're located, and so government can really support them. For the smaller businesses, like I said, government can actually look to support them with funding, with cash, and maybe even give them materials. So if for example, you are selling food stuff in your shop and got
Yeah.
looted at once, government can give you it can replace those food stuff so you can get back on your feet. It's going to be tough, but it's doable. I mean, I saw pictures of Adinro Gusoya in Surulere where I lived. I saw pictures of Body Thomas, and my heart, you know,
Heartbreaking. Heartbreaking images.
yeah,
Heartbreaking
my
videos.
heartbreaking images. I saw shops that I knew, shops that I had patronized. I saw them totally looted and burnt down and destroyed, and it was disturbing. But it's not the end of life. Businesses can always rise back again on their feet as long as the proper conditions are provided for them to do so.
Well, now, fortunately or unfortunately, we are not going to be discussing anything related to the political side of things tonight. But we will be discussing some of the really, really, troubling issues when it comes to the issue of taxation and small businesses. There's a school of thought at the moment that's thinking, from the government side of things, that is thinking that why should they give any form of support to these businesses, especially when so few people pay tax, especially the ones who fall into the self-employed bracket. Now, we'll be discussing that when we get back. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we get back, Michael, we're going to talk a little bit more about taxation. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to another edition of Just a Banter. And tonight we have a very special guest on the show. His name is Michael Ango. Michael is a lawyer and a tax consultant. And like I said, if you didn't join us from the early part of the show, Michael is one of the most brilliant minds that you can come across when it comes to his field of endeavor. And he also works at Anderson Tax. Anderson Tax, I mean, who hasn't heard of Anderson and later Anderson Tax? If you haven't, then you're actually not in the world of business. Michael is there. He's at the forefront he's at the forefront of the battle to get businesses performing at an optimum. Now, Michael, we've been looking at the issue of taxation and what it means for small businesses, especially when people are going through such a traumatic experience when it comes to the end SARS protest. But some people, especially a few government officials, they haven't said it out, officially and all that, but they've been wondering, why should they give that type of support to small businesses, especially when so many people fall outside the tax bracket, as far as they are concerned?
Well, the first thing, are you there?
Hear me, Michael?
Yeah, I can hear you. So the first thing to say is that the primary responsibility of government is the security of lives and property.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I said the first answer to that question is that the very first purpose of government is the security of life and property.
Yes.
So it is government's duty to secure lives and property of people. And where government fails in that duty, then there is nothing wrong if the same government then decides to say, look, yes, I was supposed to protect your business and I failed in my duty, and I want to support you to get yourself back up. But more than that, I think the question is not really about how many businesses pay taxes. It is
Okay.
about what the government wants to do in order to ensure that there's economic activity in the uh, in the country. Now, let me explain what I mean. You see, if we look at all economic activities simply from the narrow perspective of how much tax can I get, then we miss the point. Do not forget that businesses employ people, they pay them wages, and because those people are employed and earn wages, they're not out on the streets picking people's pockets. They're not out on the streets smashing people's cars. And I think that one of the reasons why a lot of people have said that the government needs to do more in terms of providing employment and all is because there were a large number of persons who came out during the protests, and then did all sorts of things. Some went to warehouses as we saw, and I watched clips where people said, "Look, we're possessing our possession." Funny, imagery. But the reality is that government also has a duty to provide the conditions to enable businesses thrive. And so, if what government has to then do is support businesses with funding, then why not? I mean, we've seen so many programs of the government. We've seen things like trader money, farmer money, market money. We've seen the Nigerian Youth Fund that was recently launched. All sorts of things, project, anchor borrowers project, and so government is actually providing money to the public sector, private sector rather. And so, in my view, there is nothing wrong with supporting businesses who have suffered losses. You could even say to them, look, listen, I'm giving you this fund at zero interest rate and all of that. You will return it in 2, 3 years or whatever terms you want to put. But the reality is that these businesses also serve a purpose. They're not just there to collect, to enable government collect taxes, but they are there also to keep people busy, to keep people employed. Like the popular saying goes, idle mind is the devil's workshop. And so, an unoccupied person who doesn't have any means of livelihood, who doesn't have an office or a shop or some other form of business activity to go to,
Yeah.
it cannot further for all the kind of incidents that we saw during the protests. So, what I would say is that my advice to government is that look, there's nothing wrong in supporting businesses, and if anyone is saying don't do that, do not listen to such a person because it's likely that such a person does not understand the full extent of the responsibility of government towards its citizens.
Yeah, but we have seen that. We have seen that in several aspects, in several areas when it comes to the public sector in Nigeria, where a lot of the people who actually work in those offices truly don't understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing. But that's a matter for another day. We're not going to be here to criticize them, because if we decide to go into that, we're probably going to do like 5 or 6 shows to try to even capture the essence of it at all in the first place. But you work at Anderson Tax. Anderson Tax is a massive, massive, massive household name when it comes to the world of business. Now, a lot of small businesses probably can't afford Anderson Tax. So am I assuming?
Well, again, hello?
Yeah, I can wait. I'm here. I can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll say to you that when it comes to professional services, there is, of course, a market segmentation. And the reason simply is that not everybody needs your services. Not everybody needs a Ferrari, not everybody needs a Mercedes Benz. Not
True.
everybody wants to sleep in a five-star hotel. And that is why you have one-star hotels, you have two-star hotels. Not everyone can afford them. And it is the same with professional services. You would always have your market that your niche market, but which is not to say that Anderson Tax cannot work for small businesses. We actually do work for some SMEs and we advise them. In fact, one of the things we're thinking of starting to do is do some kind of pro bono service. We're launching a tax app shortly, that can just give people some basic information. We do a lot of newsletters. We write articles that provide free information to the public. So a small business may not necessarily engage Anderson Tax to prepare the tax returns or to give them a tax advice, as it were, but you have access to our resources, the information we provide. But the reality is that there are sufficient number of tax professionals, there's sufficient number of tax advisors in every segment of the market. There are those who are focused on serving the big companies. There are those who are focused on serving the mid-market, and then there are those who are focused on serving, the small businesses, startups, and all of that. What I'll say as a professional is that you never say never. A business might start small today and then it will blow up in a few years to come. We've seen Nigerian businesses that were bought up that started like just startups with a few guys, and then recently, we had a story of Paystack that was acquired by Stripe for 200 million USD.
Yes.
So, a thorough professional will never say, I'm not going to work for you. What he will then say is, look, let me see how I can support you. Maybe at this time you can't afford my services, but I'll do what I can for you. And then let's keep in touch. Let's have that relationship. If you then grow bigger and you need my services, I'll always be there for you. So the smaller businesses also don't need the kind of cost. They don't need to bear the kind of cost that comes with hiring professional service firms like Anderson Tax. What they need to do is probably have an in-house professional who can give them, just the basic information. But then if there is a specific issue, a complex issue, whether tax or regulatory or any other area of business endeavor, then of
Yeah.
course you can come to a business like ours, and then we'll provide the support that you need to ensure that you're well guided in taking your business decisions.
Okay. So what actually led to that question is there are loads and loads and loads of small businesses who might actually want to pay tax, but they just do not have the capability to put together their tax returns and then actually pay those taxes.
You're right.
And it doesn't happen just in Africa or in Nigeria, it happens all over the world. I have experienced it once or twice. And from experience, I realized that it was always better to hire a professional to do it. Now, in my opinion, both private and public sector should be collaborating deeply on how to improve revenue when it comes to taxation. That's what led to that question. Where can small businesses, how and where can they source professionals to help them manage their tax returns in Nigeria?
Okay. So I used to work at the FIRS. I worked there for about 8 years, and we realized at that time that smaller businesses needed support. And what we then did was to say, look, one of the first things that the business needs in terms of compliance is information. And so we set up, units that were focused on just taxpayer enlightenment, taxpayer education, and we were the taxpayer services department.
Okay.
Now, the reality is that the tax authorities need to do more in terms of not just educating the tax paying society, but also providing channels and avenues for them to easily comply. So one of the things that we've seen recently is that the FIRS has set up online payment platforms for taxes, but these payment platforms are not well utilized for whatever reason, I don't know. It could be a function of the fact that they haven't done enough in enlightening people or educating. It also could be a function of ease of usage and all of that.
Yes.
So the answer to it is that the first port of call, if I were a small business, the first place I'll go to is actually the tax authority. I'll say, look, listen, I want to comply. I don't know how to comply. You need to help me, because that will come free of charge, as it were. And then, of course, the tax authority should also look for such opportunities, because it then means that you're able to even know who these businesses are and where they are, and then you can track them. So the first port of call should be the tax authority. Then there are professional bodies. We have professional bodies like CITN, ICANN, and all of that, who are made of professionals. I believe they have units that are also dedicated to supporting businesses pro bono. So that could also be another port of call. And then,
Okay.
like I mentioned earlier, you could find professionals within the range of fees that you'll be able to pay for your professional services. But I would say that overall, what needs to happen is that we need to see the tax authorities doing more in terms of supporting small businesses to comply. So if you have a small business with a turnover of 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, they may not have complex transactions, very basic bookkeeping and accounting, in and out, ledgers and all of that. So it could be easy to support them, even from the perspective of if it means even the tax authority actually sending some money from within the tax authority to go to that company and help them to put together their papers. Like I said, it could also be then a means of you getting more information about the companies and you'll be able to track them as they go. So these are some of the things that government needs to do more. Like I said earlier, it's not always having to give somebody a grant or give him a form. If I want to prepare my tax return, that ordinarily I'll pay 100,000 to a consultant to do that for me, but then government helps me to do that, then it saves me 500,000. More importantly, it also means that whatever I submit to them is the proper thing because they supported me in putting it together. So these are some of the initiatives that we would like to see going forward to support SMEs, so that they also can become tax compliant businesses. And it's always easier to comply from the start. Not that later on when you've grown bigger, then you say you want to start complying. It's likely that you would have made a lot of mistakes and errors, and you may then have past liabilities that you may find very difficult to pay.
Tons and tons of back taxes, and that can cripple your business for life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now in a country like Nigeria, with its massive peculiarities, you have so many people in the informal sector who do not have that level of sophistication or that level of education. Yeah. But they are willing to be tax compliant, citizens, pay both their income tax, and if they have small businesses or cottage businesses, they would have also liked to pay tax. Mm-hmm. Is there any form of information management that the government can do in order to be able to get this message across to these people? If you were in a position to advise, let's say the federal government of Nigeria, what would be your advice in terms of information dissemination to that informal sector?
The first thing is that every business is situated within a particular locality. And within that locality, you have, at the very worst, you have a local government, you have a ward, or you would have some form of organization. So let's take the typical Wuse market, for example. You have market executives of Wuse market, the guys who collect the 100 naira or whatever amount it is that you pay at the gate. So these are channels that could be used. You could use the market authorities for enlightenment and education. So, for example, when it comes to collection of VAT in the market, you can use the market authorities to speak to their, the businessmen and women in the market and say to them, look, listen, you're supposed to charge a particular amount on your goods, and then you're supposed to remit that to government. You could start at that level.
Okay.
The other level could be then to say, look, set up a particular team. And that could be from the state government, it could be from the federal government, it could even be from the local government. A particular team that is dedicated and focused on going out there to educate, businesses and even individual taxpayers. But over and above that, the tax authorities themselves have to take the lead because they are the ones who have the primary responsibility. And that's why I mentioned to you that while I was at the FIRS, we had dedicated departments that were focused on just taxpayer education, taxpayer enlightenment. And we had road shows, we had all sorts. I mean, a lot is going on. You watch adverts on TV, you see adverts on papers.
Yeah.
And then with new media and all that, it's not even, you don't have to use traditional channels. You could use any of the channels. You could use Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. What is important is for the information to get to where it is useful. But not just to provide information, you also have to provide assistance. And that's what I mentioned earlier, that government should also can also explore the possibility of providing assistance, direct assistance to companies in terms of complying with tax obligations and all of that. At the end of the day, government must see that as an investment. an investment towards ensuring that we improve the level of tax compliance in Nigeria, improve the level of tax compliance in the states, improve the level of tax compliance in the local government, which will then lead to increased revenue for you to be able to do the things that you are voted or elected to do. Provide roads, hospitals, schools, potable water, security, and all of that.
If only they would provide hospitals. I mean, that electricity and hospitals, those two things, I'm sure Nigeria will see a massive, massive turnaround because there's so many young people who are so creative, who are running tiny businesses from their laptops, from their mobile phones.
Yeah.
And those could be tax compliant citizens if only they actually could see that their monies were being used for something that was of interest to them and that was beneficial. Now, you wrote, or was it a case of you partook in writing the ABC of taxation?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, we did. We did. We put together the ABC of taxation, even though it wasn't my idea. I think it was the idea of a friend of mine named Richard Kojevo.
Okay.
But he brought the proposal up while I was at the FRS. And yeah, we wrote it. What was the question about that?
Now, the book, The ABC of Taxation, how relevant is it today in terms of
Okay.
people
So
learning
let
the
me explain
basics?
to you what was behind that concept. There's this saying, catch them young, the youth,
Yeah.
or whatever, the children are the leaders of tomorrow. It's very true when it comes to taxation. We discussed apathy earlier on, and the
Yeah.
truth is that the Bible says that train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Largely true, even though there are always exceptions to the general rule. But when it comes to taxation, if you go to the developed countries and developed societies that have significant level of tax compliance, what happens is that from young age, from
Yeah.
childhood, children they imbibe that culture of tax compliance. When the bills come in, when your dad pays taxes. And let me digress a bit. It also applies in our own culture too of paying taxes. People pay for their water, people pay for their electricity. When I was schooling in the US, my bills came, I had to pay them. My gas bill came, I paid it. My electricity bill came, I paid it. When I had to go use the washing machine in the basement, I had to buy a card and use it. So people have that culture that, look, you pay for what you use.
Yeah.
So that also can happen in the tax sector. So the idea of that ABC of taxation was to say, can we do something that will provide information for kids who are growing up, who have begun to read and who can understand? And so we put together a number of concepts. We call it ABC because we had a tax-related word from A to Z, and we
Oh,
defined what the
brilliant.
concept was. And it was a very interesting book because it had pictures, it had diagrams, it had illustrations. So it was just our own way of saying, look, if you are able to educate the young ones and they know about taxation, then growing up, it's already part of them. And when they have to pay their taxes as adults or as working class persons or as business owners, they would not find it difficult. And you mentioned that there are a lot of young people who work out of their laptops and their mobile phone. Very true. And the interesting thing about technology is that technology gives you the ease of tracking. So if, for example, I have an app that people subscribe to and they have to pay subscription, it is so easy to track it. It's the easiest one. It's harder to track someone who's selling cartons of Indomie in the market or someone who's selling, eggs out there.
Yeah.
If I mean, I'm sure that this radio show, we can easily track the number of persons who are watching or subscribing, assuming
Oh,
each
yeah.
of those persons was paying $1 or a naira to view the program, then it will be easier to say, look, 10,000 people watch this program today. Each of them paid a naira. It's 10,000 naira. There's nowhere to run to. So that was the whole idea then, to say, look, we needed to this demography, the young ones, people between the ages of 5 and maybe 20 or 18, as the case may be. We needed to give them information, and it was very successful. And it's something that I would even suggest to the tax authorities today that, if they could print those books again and go out there and disseminate them, because Nigerians, young Nigerians need to be taught that as they grow up, they would have obligations to their country. And interestingly, the Constitution of Nigeria provides that every Nigerian citizen must lawfully and truthfully declare his taxes and his income and pay his taxes. So there's
Yeah.
even a constitutional basis to tax compliance in Nigeria. So yeah, that was the background application, and I really, really am proud of it. It's one of the most impactful things that I've done in my career.
So, viewers, like we told you just as we were starting the show, Michael has been there, has done that. But like I said, one of those brilliant young minds I've met in a long, long time. He wrote or co-wrote the ABC of taxation. That's far back. That tells you the type of impact that Michael has had in the world of taxation and in the world of business. Now, Michael, do you still have digital versions of that ABC of taxation?
I'm not sure if I have the digital versions, but I think the person who came up with the concept, Richard Okojevo, may have those digital versions. I'm sure if I look through my library, I could find it. It's proprietary to him, though, so I'm not sure I can share without his permission. But um, he's someone that I can always contact and ask him about it.
Okay, that would be brilliant, because as a corporate entity, we will be looking at sponsoring or supporting such an enterprise, looking
Wow.
to how we are going to be able to buy a couple of copies and give to a couple of schools so that children can start imbibing that culture, all in the bid, for us to contribute our own little bit towards making Nigeria and Africa at large a much, much better place, a safer, happy place for us all to live in. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on tonight. We've learned a lot from you, and we hope that you're going to be back at some point to give us a bit more pointers when it comes to the world of business, taxation, compliance, and also, I forgot to mention to the viewers, Michael also understands GDPR. Michael is also a consultant when it comes to that as well. Michael, like I said, is a brain box, not a brain box of a car, but it's actually a movie brain box. Michael, thank you so much for coming on. So we hope we have you on again sometime where we discuss something like GDPR compliance and all of that. You have a great night.
Habib, thank you so much for having me here, and it's a pleasure anytime. Just to clarify, in Nigeria, it's the NDPR, not the GDPR, but yeah, I'm a data protection service provider, and I'll be happy to come and talk about data protection anytime. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Michael. You have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, bye.
So, very interesting session with Michael Ango there. We've learned quite a lot from him, especially when it comes to the issue of taxation. It's very important to every society, for both the private sector and the public sector, to be able to contribute their own little towards making their environment a much safer, much happier place to exist or coexist, as the case might be. Now, we will always end our shows. We always give our social messages. Two of them, basically, that we always talk about. And the first, like we always say, is say no to rape. Rape is something that is destroying societies all over the world. When you talk about Nigeria, you're looking at 25% of women, 1 in 4, before the age of 18, experience sexual abuse, i.e. rape. We all need to be very careful. We all need to be very watchful. It happens all over the world. It's not limited to just Nigeria or to Africa or to underdeveloped societies. It happens everywhere. Recently, I saw a video somewhere in London, South London, where a young man was abusing a kid. Unfortunately, we can't play that video because it's quite disturbing, but I'm sure you get the import of that kind of thing happening. So please, watch your children carefully. Listen to them. Sometimes they say stuff you don't know what they're saying. In silence, their words. Look at their behavior, look at their attitude. Has something drastically changed? Maybe they need to cry out, maybe they need to speak up, but there's no way for you to actually know what it is that they're going through mentally. Watch who you leave your children with. You never know. Even close relatives could be dangerous. Please monitor your children. Be very careful. Even old folks experience sexual abuse. Please use any of the hashtags on the screen, or both of them, as a matter of fact. Support the campaign against rape. Use hashtag no excuse or the hashtag no to rape to show your support and let the whole world know that you're against this horrible, horrible, horrible crime against humanity called rape. Now, COVID-19 is still very real. There's spikes all over the world. It's happening in the United Kingdom. There's been a lockdown. Happening in the Republic of Ireland, where I live originally, and there's a lockdown. All over Europe, they're beginning to lock down. The United States, well, because of the elections and all the politics that surrounds it, there's no lockdown right now, but who knows? Just probably right after the elections, you might have a lockdown, happening in the United States as well. Please wash your hands as often as you can. Wear a face mask when you're in public. It is extremely important. I'm sure face masks will actually save you from having to go through a vaccination of sorts if you don't want to go through a vaccination. So please use a face mask at all times when you're in public spaces, in a public vehicle like a taxi or a bus or on a train, or you're getting on a plane. Please, please, please maintain a safe distance. 2 meters is the required distance for us all to be safe. We thank you all for taking out the time to join us again tonight. We hope to see you on Sunday, same time, 8 p.m., when we're bringing on some fantastic young men. I mean, these guys, when I first saw them, they blew my mind. I call them the young geniuses of Nigerian movies. You need to see these guys in action. You need to watch them. I mean, they're absolutely mind-blowing. I'm not going to tell you their names. Watch out for them from the promo videos that are going to come up. You have a great night. Have a fantastic weekend. I will see you on Sunday. Good night.